With the world the way that it is now, it's hard to remember that there was a time before and after Cats. Prior to the announcement of the movie Cats, I knew about 5 things about Cats. It was about cats, it was a Broadway show, it was very, very famous. A lot of people in the 90s and 80s really, really liked it. And then there was this part from BoJack Horseman, which literally took me 3 years to understand. So to clarify before this video essay begins, I'm not an expert. I'm very far from it. I have 2 degrees, one is in screenwriting and the other is in media studies. And I really wanted to make a point about the fact that I don't think Cats 2019 is a good movie, but I wanted to explain why and why it's a huge warning sign for musicals in the future and Hollywood in general. Before I go into great detail about why the film is weird and crazy and f***ed up, I do want to make a point about the fact that there is a lot of fantastic Cats content, specifically by Lindsay Ellis, Cameron James, and obviously Ralph Sepe. These are all people who I look up to, and I have tried not to watch any of their content before making this video. One of the videos that I will be referencing is Patrick Willems' Cats video because I watched it prior to doing a lot of research and a lot of the editing for this video. I didn't want to just take any old information. I really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of what the people who made the film thought of the film, but also while making this video, a lot of stuff has come out, and honestly, it was too much to fathom. I already know that you're already looking at the running time of this video and being like, Jesus Christ, I can't sit through all of this, but I implore you. I'll go through the history of Cats, both as a Broadway musical as well as the way that the film was produced, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty of why this film is an absolute travesty, and also why Tom Hooper was the worst choice for this film. So let's begin on the history of Cats. Cats is a musical about AIDS. No, that's a rant. Fuck. Cats is a musical about a poor orphan boy. No, that's Oliver. Fuck, goddamn. Cats is a musical about Alexander Hamilton. Oh my fuck. Where the fuck is the script? The year is 1981. Cats is a musical that was originally created in 1981 by Andrew Lloyd Webber. It is a multi-award-winning Broadway musical based on the poems of T.S. Eliot, specifically Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. Now, the cats in the musical Cats are called jellicles. It was apparently a weird way of saying angelical, that T.S. Eliot's niece or some shit, they were like saying jellicle and they meant angelical, and now it's in the musical. Anyway, it's the 4th longest running Broadway show and it's the 6th longest running West End show. It has won 7 Tony Awards and has been shown in 30 different countries and has been translated into 15 different languages. The show actually pioneered several parts of what makes Broadway musicals amazing. Firstly, it had a truly amazing marketing strategy that was entirely built around just cat eyes, which honestly no one has done since 1981. They also made a whole point about using merchandising to help sell the show. You couldn't go around to any Broadway musical fan's house for several years without having a piece of Cats merchandise, including them owning a cat, which, to be fair, happens to just be a weird coincidence that we don't talk about. The main influence that they have had is on mega musicals. Now, these are the huge productions that would obviously be pushed towards Broadway initially, and then around the world shortly afterwards. They would spend millions of dollars and then would obviously dominate society with amazing pull quotes from different types of Broadway critics, merchandising, and then ultimately a film, if it was successful. Prior to that, there was a 1998 direct-to-video adaptation of the musical, which was basically just the stage show that they had filmed. It was quite amazing, and I actually watched it for this review. I will say that in comparison to the film, it is stunning. The choreography, the makeup, the music, there is so much that is mistranslated from the original Broadway musical to the screen. It is in itself a tragedy, a level of hubris that feels kind of weird because it looks incredibly weird. But beyond that, there was a time in the 90s where Cats was going to be adapted into a film, specifically an animation. It's why Amblin, Steven Spielberg's production company, appears at the start of the film. They held the rights for a long time, and were going to make it a part of their Amblimation? Oh, that is a terrible name for an animation company. Right up there with Bad Drawings Incorporated. Yes, during the early 90s, Steven Spielberg worked with Don Bluth to create Amblimation. It was actually quite amazing because they had made several films, including An American Tail, Where Back a Dinosaur Story, and several TV series, including Back to the Future and Fievel's American Tales. It was kind of a tragedy when they shut down the animation studio in 1997, and a lot of the people who worked for it went on to make a little company called DreamWorks. The one weird thing about Amblimation that I will mention is that they actually did have some production stills that they released about Cats. In fact, in the early 90s, Cats was kind of a go-to reference for Broadway musicals, either as a joke, seen here in The Simpsons, Or in this very odd scene from the movie 6 Degrees of Separation with Will Smith, where he tries to talk his way into a fancy country club setting, specifically by introducing the fact that his father is producing a movie based on the musical Cats. Let's see how they react to this very normal thing someone would say.
Actually, he's doing a movie.
He's in the movies?
He's directing this one, but he does act.
Really? What's he directing?
Cats.
Someone is directing a film of Cats?
Don't be snooty.
Well, you've seen it? T.S. Eliot?
Yes, years ago.
It was a benefit for some school or disease. What?
Surely they can't make the movie of Cats.
No, of course I can.
Yeah. So, it was kind of weird for the fact that there was a hugely successful Broadway musical in the 80s, they tried to make a movie adaptation in the 90s, and then almost 4 decades later, they made this. Sweet Christ. So how did we get from here to here? Now, I will be using very few bits of the movie just for copyright reasons, but I do want to make a point about the fact that there are so many absurd and insane things in this film, I have to use footage. There are several things that I have explained to dozens of people who have asked me about this project, who have talked to me about the fact that I'm making this video essay, and when I describe certain scenes and certain parts to them, they are very confused until I show them. And while I shouldn't have to make a direct point about the use of fair use, which is technically an American idea rather than the weird version of fair use that we have in this country, which I'm putting on the screen right now, I want to make a point about the fact that all of the footage that I use in this video essay is under fair use. Because without it, I don't think I could make the dark, deep, horrifying points that I wish to make in this video essay. So let's talk about why we got the movie we got. Before I sat down to record the audio for this video essay, I had a small portion that reviewed the 1998 Broadway straight-to-video adaptation of Cats. There is a level of heart and charm and whimsy that comes with any Broadway musical. There is a suspension of disbelief. You see what you see on stage, because if they were to go any further, that would probably be a little bit too realistic. It would put yourself in a mindset that wouldn't be able to go along with the magical realism of the fantasy that is before you. I have to say that the amazing work that Andrew Lloyd Webber, someone who I don't really respect, and I'm not someone who is a huge fan of Broadway musicals, but absolutely adores movie musicals. I think that there is something wonderfully camp about Cats. It isn't greater than what it is trying to be. It is both so wonderfully absurd and brilliant, but also at the same time, it is ridiculous and over the top. I think it is what Andrew Lloyd Webber was going for, and while I won't go into full details about the original musical, I think it is completely unfair to use this version of the Broadway filmed performance as a comparison to the film. I think it is great to crib off and to look at notes from, but I don't think ultimately it represents what the actual experience of seeing Cats is actually like. I think there are certain things that you can get from a filmed performance, but I think it's very similar to a lot of people who've looked up bootleg copies of Hamilton who honestly can't afford or simply can't make it to a performance of Hamilton. I actually spoke with somebody who is a huge fan of Hamilton before going into this film because, I don't know if you know, but they hired Andy Blankenbuehler to do the choreography. Now, I trust Andy a whole bunch, mainly because he helped with the 2016 revival of Cats. He seems perfect for the job. However, when I looked into the reviews of that 2016 revival, it appears that none of the choreography was changed. For people who don't know, in the original musical, it was done by Gillian Lynne. Gillian Lynne was obviously very famous for her very inspired and wonderful movement and bodywork in the original production of Cats. However, the main difference, or at least one of the main differences in watching Cats 2019, is the differences in choreography. There is a lot of stuff not only missing here, but also a lot of stuff that has been changed. There is obviously a lot of songs that are omitted from the original version of Cats, but there's also a lot of things that are very different. And we'll get into those, but mainly it was a shock. Now, I know Andy Blankenbuehler has won several Tony Awards, not just for Hamilton, but for also Bandstand and In the Heights, two other fantastic musicals. He has been nominated for even great adaptations to 9 to 5, as well as Bring It On, two great films that were eventually adapted into Broadway musicals. However, I am not somebody who can dance, nor am I a choreographer, nor do I have any depth of knowledge beyond what I read and researched in looking into this video. And yet, this was a key piece of information that I did take into account in the differences of the film and the Broadway musical. The second big difference is Tom fucking Hooper not being a great musical director.
Welcome to Cat School. I'm Tom Hooper, director of the motion picture Cats.
For people who don't know, Tom Hooper is a British director. He started off working on several different soaps back in the day, including episodes of Cold Feet and the fantastic series Prime Suspect. Then eventually he began to work for HBO. He did a fantastic adaptation of Elizabeth I and John Adams.
No, I regret to say I have no ear for la musique.
And eventually won a series of awards for those limited series. Eventually, in 2004, he became a feature film director with the film Red Dust, which I didn't bother to watch, so f*** it. And then eventually he created a film in 2009 called The Damned United. Now, Patrick Willems goes into depth more about Tom Hooper's career in his video on Cats, so I won't reiterate any of that, but he does make a few directorial choices that really point out a lot of things that he would bring to the musicals that he would eventually direct. In 2010, he directed The King's Speech, which he eventually won an Academy Award for, as well as Best Picture, Best Actor, and a few others that I can't be bothered to look up at the moment. It is amazing to see something like The King's Speech in comparison to, say, Cats, for a whole range of reasons, not just the fact that it's an Academy Award-winning film, but also from a directorial technique. There are a lot of things that he employs in the film The King's Speech, as well as Les Mis, that eventually he tries to bring into Cats.
Mine, I do this thing where I go meow, 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 which is odd, but it works.
There are two very key moments and key points that has been a part of, if I guess you could call Tom Hooper's directorial style. He uses a lot of close-ups. He uses a lot of handheld camera work when usually it would be supported for more intense scenes, more action-oriented scenes. There are parts in both of those films where there are strong emotional points, and they have to have resonance with the audience. There are close-ups, so many close-ups, a lot of close-ups. In fact, in a part that I'm going to talk about later on, I do compare two scenes from Les Mis and Cats because I think that they're fair. They're both musicals and they both have a single female vocalist doing a very well-known song. And it's shot almost the same way. The problem is that one of the characters doesn't have fur on them, and one of them definitely fucking does. Tom Hooper is by no means a bad director. He has a lot of technical skill. He's able to produce something that is both interesting but also fascinating to watch at the exact same time. And I know those sound like namby-pamby, kind of like superlative words that you just kind of throw out there when you're just trying to generally describe something, but his work is fascinating to watch. Anyway, the point is that Tom Hooper tries to employ the same cinematic techniques in Cats, and it doesn't work. I think that Tom Hooper was not the right directing choice for Cats. But the sad thing is that he's a huge fan.
Well, I first saw Cats when I was 8 years old in 1981, in the first year of its run in London, and I completely fell in love with it. And I got the cassette tape and we listened to it with the family in the car till it wore out. And so really my toughest critic has been my 8-year-old self, who's been like, you better get it right.
Yeah. He really loved Cats. And they say that pride comes before the fall, but it shouldn't take 20 years to get there. And for that, I'm truly saddened. It makes me feel sad that there are a lot of extremely talented and wonderful and truly huge fans of this movie.
When I first heard I was going to be in Cats, woo!
They gave them their all. They gave everything that they had, whether they were singers or dancers or actors, or simply were just there to build a huge-ass set. And it is with this great sadness that I tell you the 5 fucking best parts about Cats, completely without irony and without any disdain. Let's jump into the film. To start off, talking about the best parts of Cats is like talking about the best part of tapioca pudding. Tapioca pudding is quite nice, and obviously it doesn't look appealing, but there are some positives to tapioca pudding. The texture, it's how it tastes, maybe a few things you can add to it. But the main part is that, at the end of the day, it's still tapioca. Before we get into the absolute deluge of how awful this film is, I thought I'd highlight some good parts to show that I'm not just here to bash the film. I think that every single film, no matter how good or bad, that they still have some bright, shining moments that make us want to deeply indulge into them one more time. Or I've gone literally insane with Stockholm Syndrome for the amount of times that I've watched this film of Cats 2019. First and foremost, Francesca Hayward's performance. She's a great audience avatar and helps slowly bring you into the world of Cats. Even if it's like a former patient showing you an insane asylum that they were once a part of, it's just nice. It's great to have her around. She's a sense of calm and grace that really overshadows a lot of the other performances in the film. For people who don't know, Francesca Hayward, or
Frankie Hayward,
as they keep calling her in interviews, is a very incredibly talented, trained ballet dancer. You have to remember that constantly, she's a regular cat out of the bag, literally and figuratively in the film. Even though she's surrounded by cats, they still treat her how she was represented in the original musical, much like a kitten. While Francesca Hayward's performance is softer and graceful, it's largely forgotten amongst the wider cast of Cats. A lot of bigger names and bigger singers are a part of this performance, and when there are newer and bigger personalities introduced, she's sadly dwarfed.
You know, Victoria, the character, is the lead, beautiful ballerina in the show Cats, but in the original show she doesn't have a song and we never hear from her, which is something that Tom and Andrew and I all three of us thought like that should change. That's the one thing missing.
In comparison to the 1998 musical, Victoria's role is lessened, but is still present in the chorus. She obviously gets a song and a huge part of being with Jennifer Hudson. In fact, she is the main theme of kindness and inclusion that bridges the gap between herself and the Cats and Grizabella. In the movie, she's just there, which is a real shame. Like, I looked at Hayward's performance as a ballet dancer more than an actor or a singer, and she shines. The camera moves around her as graceful as she is. She does an amazing job, and Hooper's directorial style actually accentuates her work. Sadly, in the film, she is a shrinking violet, and sadly she gets lost in the world of Cats as much as we do. She does a lot of just mugging and a lot of smiling with her eyes, which is totally fine. She is an innocent character. She's there to represent a new being in the world of Cats. Secondly, Jennifer Hudson's performance. Memories is such a fantastic and integral part of the musical and in the movie. It really shows how important these songs are for Cats. When I was originally writing the script, the first thing I wrote down was that Hudson really brings a beautiful and dramatic interpretation of Grizabella and of the song Memories, but the only thing that truly brings it down is the CGI animation on her face. You can barely see her emote as much as she could when she sings the song, and unfortunately, I found footage of her singing on The Voice. She gives everything to it. Obviously, during the musical, she had to sing the song live, so it's almost a one-to-one. It's very, very telling that Hooper was entranced in the performance while shooting it, but sadly it doesn't make the transition when the visual effects department was brought on. They used the visual effects animation, at least to the best examples, to accentuate an actor's performance, to add a level of believability to no matter how outlandish the scenario in the world of Cats. Special effects can show the truly horrible passage of time and the emotional resonance of dealing with depression when surrounded by the most happiest moments and people in your life, or even to show the simplest background visual gag for foreshadowing for an upcoming scene. These are to add to the storytelling, they're add to the characters, they're add to the world. These are all additions to the film that are not necessarily just visual, but helps provide a sense of layer to the characters or the tone, or to at least represent an arc for the narrative. This, however, this visual effect within this performance, it subtracts, it removes, it takes and takes and takes, and it doesn't make us feel what we're meant to feel. Sadness, sympathy, empathy even. Well, the visual effects to Jennifer Hudson's performance simply takes away so much. She's a fantastic and wonderful actress, and to completely remove that from just adding digital fur, it's a sad sight to see. This is just a way to represent the movie that was unintended by the actor, the cinematographer, the visual effects team, and the visual effects supervisor, the writer, and ultimately, hopefully, the director. The person who's meant to be in charge of all of this. Memories is a song about loss in the light of facing one's mortality, or at least facing one's limits. Anyway, that's what Genius says. I basically cribbed all of that off here. It's probably one of the most popular musical songs in all of history. It's weird that even I, someone who loves musicals but never even bothered to look at Cats before going into this video, I still knew the song. I knew about the song prior to 2018. In fact, one of the best memories that I have of Memories is this scene in School of Rock.
I can sing.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Summer, belt it.
Memory all alone in the moonlight.
Stop. Okay, good. That's pretty good. All right.
Now that was over a decade and a half ago, and yet it still resonated with me. Anytime I would hear it used as a joke or a punchline, it was mainly as a part of its cultural impact. Regardless, I want to make a point that Memories is a very good song, that ultimately feels out of place in something as horrible as Cats as a movie. It's why I would implore people who are fans of the musical, and not necessarily the movie, to still access the album on Spotify, or even buy the CD. There was no vinyl release. Who the fuck is going to pay for a vinyl of Cats? But seriously, except for the songs by Rebel Wilson and the song Andrew Lloyd Webber and Taylor Swift wrote together just to get an Oscar, it's a good song. And the most unfortunate part of this is someone who really wanted to dunk hard on this film, to give it the L that it deserves, as a terrible white person would say. I think that it's a standout performance. It's fantastic. Jennifer Hudson is only on the screen for about less than 10% of the film's entire runtime, and she shines. She does really, really well. For a film that is visually unappealing to watch, she stands out. She makes her voice heard, and she makes her presence known. It's very, very hard to have the song Memories in the musical Cats, because it's like putting a roadblock in a parade. It's a parade of nightmares and ridiculousness, but once Memories shows up, you realize that there was heart, that there was life, that there was so much to this musical that we were willing to just throw in the trash. But we can't. It's a real shame.
Jason.
Moving next is Jason Derulo. I don't like Jason Derulo as a musician. I think he's a little bit over the top. I think some of his songs are unnecessarily overly sexual and a little bit too ridiculous to be taken seriously. However, Jason Derulo wants to be taken seriously. He's quite good, and it looks like he was the only one that he was proud to be in this film even after the press tour finishes. I have literally an hour worth of interview footage that I went through that is just Jason Derulo really enjoying his time talking about Cats.
I love the sets and the oversized details of everything.
Yeah.
What did you think of it when
I
you
think
saw it?
it was unbelievable, man. When I first walked in and I saw it, I was like, man, this is crazy. It reminded me of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
There is pride in his work, and he cares every single second he's on screen. He truly embodies the character of Rum Tum Tugger to the point that he doesn't mug, he isn't over the top, he is exactly that character and what it needs to be. It's just a shame that, much like Jennifer Hudson's performance, it's very good. It's just so sad that it's in the movie Cats. It's weird because there are so many ways that you could ham up this performance, that you could take it over the top, that you could be overly sexual, that you could take what Jason Derulo has done as a musician and translate it simply into this character. Watching the original musical, it's crazy how much Jason Derulo plays down Rum Tum Tugger. Essentially, he is like Prince of the Cats. The musician Prince, but a cat. It is in the affectation in his voice, it is how he performs, it is how he moves, but Jason Derulo makes it his own. Even with the new bits of choreography from Andy Blankenbuehler, he still is Rum Tum Tugger, just with a few extra steps. It's quite fascinating to see the comparison between the two. You can see it here side by side, how there are certain movements and certain gyrations that he makes that really makes the character who he is. He's overly sexual, he's a naughty cat, to put it very simply. But Derulo makes it his own, and again, it stands out. He's one of the very few characters who instantly makes his presence known on screen. But he downplays it a lot. There's a lot of stuff that you see the character's arrogance and the fact that he wants to go to the Heaviside Layer simply because he thinks that he can continue this tomfoolery into the next life. And it's why he will never be the cat chosen. But he makes a show-stopping performance. It really is in the nature of Cats as a musical that it's over the top. It's balls to the wall. It's amazing. It's incredible. And Jason Derulo brings his all. He shouldn't feel ashamed of his performance. He shouldn't feel ashamed of anything that he did in Cats. And yet, there are moments like this.
There's no to anything about, oh wow, dear. No.
And this. That I just hope people put Jason Derulo in more musicals. It would be a shame to not do so.
Hello, how you doing? How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we're excited to be here. I mean, why not?
So
it's kind of crazy, right?
A little bit crazy. I never expected to see myself as a cat, but here we are.
Idris Elba does an amazing job as Macavity. I think that Idris Elba was the only person who knew that he was in a bad movie while they were making the film.
Quite obviously the best.
He is only in the film for about 10.5 minutes, so there's not a lot for him to do. However, the character of Macavity as a villain, it is important. It creates a dichotomy between the good cats and the bad cats in the movie. The weird thing is that it's not really established how he relates to all of the other cats except for Grisabella. Even then, it's only kind of gestured at, and there are only 2 or 3 lines, specifically these.
Who was she?
She used to be the star of the windmill. Then she went with Macavity.
No, she lives on the wasteland.
That truly show why he's a villain and why Grisabella was cast out.
And he's a trickster. You know, he's sort of like charming one minute and then horribly desperate and insecure the next minute.
It's a damn shame. It's a weird experience because I would love to see Idris Elba in more musicals. I think there is something about him and his performance and his stage presence that I think is lost in the character of Macavity. Anytime Elba is on screen, he does a great job. Also, I just love any single line that he gets in this film, like this.
What?
Scrimbleshanks is the #1 best cat. I'm not even kidding. And also, it's not even according to me, it's according to the Thrillist, who actually ranked him as the #1 cat in the movie Cats. The song Scrimbleshanks the Railway Cat is astounding. While I may not like Cats the movie and I may not like Cats the musical, the song has been stuck in my fucking head for the last 4 months. I will find myself humming to it in the shower while doing the dishes. It is a very good song, and it brings the musical to a grinding halt in the best way possible. Your ears perk up. You listen to the pop music aesthetics. You listen to Lloyd Webber's construction of telling a ridiculous story about a cat that runs a train. It's very good. It's brilliant. In fact, honestly, it's the best part of the movie. I'm gonna say this now. I have other things to say about how great this film is, and obviously how awful it is, but Scrimbleshanks is the best part of Cats. I'm very, very sorry that you had to learn this firsthand. The dancing is just quite good. I like tap dancing. I like ballet. I like the range of dancing in this musical. However, I will say that Tom Hooper casting Francesca Hayward and obviously a lot of other characters simply for their dancing ability was one of the smartest things that they could do. The Les Twins, who are obviously this amazing French hip-hop duo, they are astounding, and I nearly cried watching their interview footage.
You guys are looking great. Talk to me about the look. You look a night like tonight. You dress up, right? Okay, here we go.
This is, I mean, you gotta get the shoes.
I had to bring the shoe that I actually used for the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. We were the only cast had the
only
shoes,
Jordan's
fur.
They have the purest of all motives of being in this film. They just want to dance and make their mom happy.
We are so happy to be here, reason why, because there's a lot of big things I did in my life, and my mom didn't even call that. Then when we told her that we're doing Cats, she actually sing a song from Cats. My mom doesn't speak English. She knows a song from Cats. I'm like, I'm about to do something my mom will actually love.
I will obviously go deep into why this film is such a shame and a sham and so schmorable, but it is so sad to see these amazing talents, these people who genuinely love the original source material, be wasted in a film like this. But I have to say that regardless of the choreography, that the dancing is good, that it's amazing, that they cast the right dancers for this film, whether they were front and center or in the background. You really do notice the artistic merit of these dancers and why they were put into this film. It's just a shame that it's Cats 2019. And finally, the cattail and ear physics are just quite good. They actually are a part of what I was saying before about accentuating character and tone. They add to the characters, they add to the playfulness of the film overall. What little there is of each character, it's something that is accentuated when you see the ear movements and tail movements. It's the one thing that they could genuinely have control over and add flourish to the movie. As visual effects artists, they can time it with the music and provide a level of magical realism that I think the original creators of Cats probably wish that they could have done in the original stage production. It's an actual advancement. It is what is known in an adaptation as a transformative moment. Something I just completely 100% made up. But it sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? I do think that whenever I saw this or noticed this, such as these scenes here, it was quite amusing. It's how cats move. It's something you couldn't train yourself in cat school. This is solid animation. This is something that the mill or NPC or whoever was doing the visual effects for just the tail and ear movements definitely had a level of creativity and were able to shine during these moments. It's just a shame that a lot of the time it's out of focus and it's not really, you can only really see it in the wide shots, which is what musicals should be about. So that is the good. Those are the only good parts about Cats. In total, it's about 16 to 17 minutes, including all of the performances and dancing that you can clearly see. Here is everything else. Now strap in. I'm going to go into everything that makes this musical a horrifying, deplorable, awful, despicable, cringe-inducing mess. So let's enjoy.
And I kind of often think, imagine if I could go back in a time machine and say to my 8-year-old self, you're going to direct the movie this one day, it would have blown my mind.
Purple.
Rebel, can you teach me one thing about cat school? Teach me one thing.
It's hot. When we were filming the movie, our cat mistress, Miss Sarah, would run in and give me some direction, and she'd just go, more cat, 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 more cat.
I used to have a Bengal cat, so I know what they're like. They're crazy.
Oh god, oh sweet fucking Christ, no, what the fuck is all this? Oh, God. Okay, all right, hold it. Let's be serious. Let's be more diplomatic and focused about this. After all, it's what I'm known for. Very focused video essays about one topic and one topic only, and never straying from my main point. Describing the worst parts or negative parts of Cats is like saying Auschwitz shouldn't have been opened during the Holocaust. Cats is bad. It's a bad film. It's a great mega musical and it has a fine soundtrack and a great cast, but I really wanted to dig deep into the flaws that were ingrained into the film from the beginning of the production process. Now look, I'm not going to go into the fact that the story doesn't make any sense, because I think that there are ultimately flaws with the musical and not the movie that I don't need to go into. Looking into the film's more technical flaws is something dozens of people have already done, but I really wanted to truly show what makes a bad movie awful, or at least to the point where it's confusing or unwatchable. I think that the majority of bad movies are made by people whose ego outweighs their creative abilities. This is a Tommy Wiseau, an Ed Wood, a Joel Schumacher, and in this case, Tom Hooper. I think Tom Hooper is an accomplished director and he makes fantastic films. I just think you can be a wrong fit for a project and still have something that's it's just bad, or you just don't know what the f you're doing.
Right, well that's not going to work, is it?
Now, with that out of the way, I do want to make a point about that. I think this is a bad film, but there are definite dark points, to put it lightly. I want the producers to know that these parts are bad, but ultimately it doesn't make it a bad film. I think that there is a level of competency that your team put together, especially in the crew, that while it doesn't end in a fantastic product, that, look, you could have done better, and I don't negotiate with terrorists. So with that being said, I am going to break down the 5 worst parts about the movie Cats, mainly so you don't have to, or simply so you don't have to watch the film in its entirety. Alright, let's start. Number 5, the opening. This is not the worst thing about the film, but it does set the weird and uncomfortable tone for the entire film. It sets you up for the abject failure from the get-go. Now, as somebody who hadn't seen the original musical before starting to do research for this video, I'm well aware that musicals often have overtures. They help bring you into the world, they help you establish the musical motifs of the story. I'm a huge fan of musicals in general, and obviously I feel as though if you're going to create a world that is visually reminiscent of your Broadway production, it's good to make sure that you're able to make it relatable or at least enjoyable for a wider audience. This film did go out to a wide audience, a wide release as it were, over 1,500 screens. Now, when you're establishing this overture, it can be fun, or joyous, or over the top, or sad, or somber, or very, very, very serious. It's a chance for the composer and the people who create the film to make a mark and truly show what you've got. And I guess that's what Cats 2019 does with this opening sound and this opening shot. It sounds like an elevator is descending into hell. It sounds like the death rattle of a kitten being thrown against the wall. It sounds like the rattling bones of a musical that should have been buried over 2 decades ago. And yet here we all are, and it's being played for us in the most horrible tones I could possibly imagine. I'm not a musician. I don't think I could make something this bad. For the world to hear that this is how you want to start your movie and the way that it's presented, it's something. It's not even like a Lovecraftian, ooh, I can't even explain how terrible it is. It's just so uncomfortable to hear.
If anybody was there that was like, kind of like, oh, I'm trying to be cool, then like, don't do the movie Cat.
It is surreal. There's no room for ambivalence in the movie Cat.
It is unpleasant. It really makes you feel like they're the howls of the cat. And if that was the original intention, that's totally fine. But it doesn't make for a great open. I also don't believe that it's fair to make fun of the plot or the characters of the musical itself, as originally this part of the musical was written over 30 years ago. Times change, people change. There has been a lot of stuff that Andrew Lloyd Webber has removed from the musical for a whole range of reasons. Characters don't work, songs don't work. There are even weird racial characters in there that they just simply removed because they were like, well, this is a little bit on the nose. But the problem is that, look, I didn't really want to make fun of the plot or the characters. They all have ridiculous names, and the plot in itself is absurd, but imagine being a fan. Imagine being a fan of this musical for over 30 years. Because that's the truly heartbreaking part about Cats, is that the people who are most disappointed by this movie were the fans. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be a fan of the musical and seeing it opening night, winning tickets, being a part of this experience, waiting this long for a movie about your favorite musical, and then the curtains part, and then seeing this shit.
Are you blind when you're born?
Can you see in the dark? Can you look at a king?
Would you sit on his throne?
It is a truly unfortunate sight, and I imagine that the actors felt the same way on opening night. Because as far as I know, from all the interviews they were in, they didn't know what they were in for. They didn't know what the final cut looked like, and they definitely didn't know when the lights went down and the movie came to life.
Is the Jellicle Ball.
Yeah, I love the Jellicle Ball.
Because
in general, but I'm excited to see what it is in the movie.
It's really good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I haven't seen the CGI'd version. I only saw the un-CGI'd, but it looks so good.
Is there a particular sequence, without giving anything away, that you are so proud of when it comes to the choreography, the way this whole thing plays out in a particular scene?
I'm proud of a lot of it, and a lot of what tonight is going to be a big surprise to me because I haven't seen it with the FX on it. I haven't seen them look like cats.
So what are you looking forward to tonight, seeing the final product?
Seeing it finished, because I finished this film at 8 a.m. yesterday morning in London after 36 hours without sleep. So this will be the first time that I showed the completely finished film to an audience. So to see it finished will be like very cool.
I got to work with them. I can't believe I got to work with them. This is all pretty surreal. I haven't even seen the movie yet, by the way.
Really?
I have no idea
We keep
what
hearing
it is.
one word, epic.
Really?
Yes.
Who said that? Did somebody
I'm
see
not
it?
going to tell you, but we have
I hope
sources.
that would be great,
We
wouldn't it?
know people on the inside.
It's gotta be hard to work on a film like Cats. It's an exhausting 6-month process. There was a lot of dancing, a lot of musical training, a lot of cat school, which we'll go into at some point.
If you told me I was going to get to go to cat school every day for work,
And to be told over and over again that things will be fixed, that this isn't what it's going to look like, that things will turn out fine, that you should just keep promoting the movie and keep talking about it and nothing bad will happen.
And now today, the director, Tom Hooper, admitted that the backlash the film's trailer received led to a few changes being made behind the scenes.
Yeah, so speaking to Empire Magazine, Hooper admits it wasn't perfect. You like that? Yeah. I wish I wrote that, but I didn't. And they made some tweaks to the cat's character designs, saying we'd only finished shooting in March, so all the visual effects were at quite an early stage. When you watch the finished film, you'll see that some of the designs of the cats have moved on since then, and certainly our understanding of how to use the technology to make them work has gone up too.
That maybe a few critics might say it's a little bit over the top, or that maybe they just won't like it. Well, they were wrong.
I think the reason why it's so, when Avatar came out, everyone was like, ooh, what's that? I'm not going to see that. And it's just because it's new technology that's different to the eye. Tom Hooper, the director, wanted your face to be what he sees on camera. Because as soon as you make the whole thing computer generated, you lose the human aspect and human emotion, the way you react and all of that, the eyes. So it's the first time that there's a computer generated body, but not the face.
They were so damn wrong for so many reasons. They were lied to, and in turn they lied to us. There are only a few other specific sequences in the film that look and sound and feel this bad, and yet the opening of the movie of Cats is somehow not the biggest deterrent to watch this movie. In fact, there are a few other scenes. Specifically, anytime there is a boat featured in this film, and I don't mean it's like a weird thing like how you spot the spoons in the room, anytime they're on McCavity's boat, it just really slows the whole film down. There is this thing called pacing in cinema, and it's about how your story flows. You usually have something that looks like this in the structure of a movie, and you have the pace at a relatively same or similar amount. You may slow it down, you may give your characters a part to breathe, to grow, develop, and to feel as though they are being a part of a wider story, and they're not being dragged through the narrative. If you're in a Terrence Malick film, the structure looks like this. If you're in a Quentin Tarantino film, it looks like this. But the standard Hollywood structure basically looks like this. You have your acts and your beats, and usually it has its peaks and valleys, and ultimately, as a denouement, or however it's pronounced, there is a point where it will come to a conclusion. There are setups, there are payoffs, there is a level of excitement, and there is satisfaction, or at least clarity, within the story that eventually has a continuation and completion. Cats technically has that, but then there are the boat sequences that really just have no major purpose being in the story. I tried to look up on whether or not they were originally part of the musical, and it was a little bit jumbled. But look, they have these boat sequences to try and enhance the drama, or at least raise the stakes in the story, but why? And how? And also, why did they include the character of Growl Tiger, a character that hasn't been in the recent iteration of Cats at all, and is weirdly played by the very beloved and very British Ray Winstone, and he's in there, and then he sings a song.
I pursue my evil aims, rejoicing in my title of the Terror of the Thames.
Right, no, see, that doesn't rhyme. You can't just say Thames because it rhymes with
Ames. It's the River Thames.
He was originally removed, and then they put him back in, and it's not really established why Macavity has these magical powers or how Growl Tiger is involved. And technically, like, excluding the cockroaches and the mice, which we'll also get into some point, Growl Tiger is the only one that dies in the movie, and it's not really, like, none of this stuff is clarified. None of it, and it's all that happens on a boat that we don't really know. We know it's in the River Thames, but we don't know if it's moving, and who owns the boat? Does Macavity own the boat? Does Macavity have a boat license? Who owns this fucking boat in the middle of the Thames that these cats are allowed to use? We don't know if the cats are okay with it or how they fare with water. It's literally just to have several of the characters who aren't really integral to the plot or the second half of the movie to just be in a different location. And it just really brings the movie to a halt. It creates a little bit of unease and maybe a tiny bit of tension, but we're unsure about why this is happening. Like, we know that Macavity is taking these characters out and they're making them disappear, but he could just make them disappear. If it wasn't for the fact that a lot of these characters were clearly not meant to be in the second half, they were meant to be a part of the wider cast, and maybe they were meant to, you know, add some star power to it. But if you've got James Corden and Rebel Wilson, you're only two directly comedic second bananas to these characters. You kind of want to have them in there, and I imagine, and I have no proof of this, that it was kind of written to their contract that they would be into the full film. So with that, I just don't see the point of the boat sequences. Like, it's super weird. And again, it's why I'm not comparing it to the musical, because I don't have a full context on if the boat was originally in it. But also, Macavity doesn't really threaten anybody. He just makes them disappear, and then they turn up on the boat. In fact, the only one he directly threatens is Judi Dench.
You will never go to the Heaviside lair.
We'll see about that. Growl Tiger, make her walk the plank.
But he doesn't really... He like, needs her so he can go to the Heaviside layer, and he doesn't really directly threaten any of them. They just know that he's a villain, and he's a villain because they tell us he's a villain. I mean, that's a whole other... Anyway, look, I think I'm thinking too much about this, and obviously this video is already getting too long, and on top of all this, it's just not visually interesting to look at. It has a similar problem to the rest of the entire CGI sequences, excluding the Scrimbleshanks portion, obviously. It's just incredibly poorly lit, and it just feels really jumbled and out of place, and so adding this whole sequence and adding the character of Growl Tiger back in, it just feels like an odd choice. Like, when the writers, which was Tom Hooper and Lee Hall, who Lee Hall knows how to write a film, he wrote Billy Elliot. It's just such a weird series of events that they're putting together, and it just feels like they wrote this part so Rebel Wilson and James Corden would have something to do. And since they're not really in the rest of the story, and most of this stuff is just improvised, they don't have lines that were in the original musical.
I can dance how he dances too.
Let me see.
It's easy.
They just had stuff that was written for them, and I imagine Tom Hooper was like, "Oh, just say something funny." It's just weird. It's just because they really wanted them in the film. And personally, if I was writing this, it wouldn't have been my Jellicle choice. Speaking of choices... The editing in Cats is abysmal, and I'm pretty sure Folding Ideas will do, like Dan Olsen will do a bigger and a better video about this, but I really wanted to touch on somebody who's been, like, you know, editing a lot. This movie fails on multiple levels as just editing a musical, simply because the editing is just too quick. It's too over the top, even for the world of Cats. Outside of some amazing wide shots, and it that really show off the cast and the amazing built sets, Cats is less of a traditional musical than, say, something modern like The Greatest Showman, or even La La Land, or even Star is Born. There are multiple different moments in the film that are filmed and edited around different songs from the original musical, but because of the script and the focus on Francesca Hayward's Victoria, you move too quickly through the sequences, and you don't really get to establish a lot of different parts of the Cats world. You kind of don't know where everybody is, how big the world is, and that's not even talking about the weird scale for a lot of the stuff. And then ultimately, there is just so much in terms of lighting and choreography that in some moments we just cut directly to close-ups of main characters or background dancers, and we kind of don't know where they are in relation to the rest of the movie. It feels like they were just put in there because it felt like it was good to cut to.
Do you think he just got neutered? Because those notes are like, you know.
I have no problem with the choreography, but I do feel like there was a lot of choices that were made during the making of the film that felt on the fly. It felt like it was put into the film because they wanted to modernize it, but there were so many other things that they also didn't modernize. So there's just these weird cuts and moments where the dancing is to the beat, but the editing isn't to the beat. So for example, this scene here, it shows that they've got all the cats together and we're ending the first Jellicle song, but then we have this direct cut in of Mr. Mistopheles.
Magical cat!
but we didn't really need to do that because Mr. Mistopheles is already in the scene and we already have this shot of all the cats, and the better way to edit it would have been to have coverage of just Mr. Mistopheles or even just put him closer to the camera, but we don't do that, so we have this really disjointed edit, and it's just for one line. And they're all moving and they're all breathing heavily. It's just a lot. It's a lot to take in. That's the weird part about Cats, is that the choices made in the film are constantly overwhelming. In fact, the average cut in the movie is about 2.3 seconds long. I know, I've checked, I've watched this film enough, and I've actually had a little stopwatch that I've gone through to check what the average shot length, or ASL, actually is. On top of all of this, most of the scenes are extremely poorly lit, especially the longer dance sequences, so you don't really get a full scope of where people are or what they're actually doing. Some of the choreography, we're only seeing some of their faces, and this is often a great way to hide poor visual effects, or at least not completed visual effects. But you wouldn't know some of the dancing was taking place outside of these wider shots because we don't get a good look at them. In fact, the editing is so weird and the continuity is pushed aside simply to show off certain characters, rather than showing off the grand world of these cats. There's a weird visual continuity that works within the confines of a musical. Usually it's to make a point about how great the musical is, or how important these moments are, or how these characters are singing their feelings, but you don't really get that. It's almost like there are times where the editing isn't to the beat of the music, and it's more to show off the characters and the way that they are a part of the world rather than why they're a part of the world. In fact, I looked up the editor, Melanie Oliver, who has worked on the majority of Tom Hooper's other works. She's also worked on several other musical projects and musical biopics. She was even a part of the Academy Award-winning film no one saw last year, Judy, and the documentary Puff Daddy, Keeping It Real. So while she has over 2 decades of experience with editing film and editing film to musical, okay, maybe musicals aren't really her forte, but she should still know to cut to the music. It just feels so weird that we're seeing the same problems crop up time and time again as we go through the film. Even though the beat is solid, there are some amazing bits of percussion, especially in the Skimbleshank sequence, that could have been easily cut to, but there is just a lot of editing that is focused to accentuate actors' faces and showing wide shots of the set, or even just to highlight the size of something. But who gives a f when you're in a musical? Yes, the cats are smaller than they're meant to be, but also, no one cares about the world. No one really is brought into the world outside of what we're told about the world. Everything is just to scale of the cats, or at least to what we believe is the scale of the cats. But then there's just weird moments where the flowers are the same size, but are they meant to be magical flowers? Are they meant to be flowers that are small? With musicals, the editing either has to be tight or it has to accentuate the music. You have long pieces of music, or you have grand moments in musicals, and you let the camera run. You have a lot of fantastic one-takes. You highlight the dancing or the music, or both, or just simply the performances. If something is emotional, you let it ride out. You let it be emotional. You let the actors take care of the performance, and then get it in editing later on. That's as simple as it gets. In fact, for musicals, for average shot length, usually they rival documentaries, or at the very least drama pictures, because they usually let takes run long. And look, that's really all I have to say about the music and the editing. It's just hard to follow in this film. The editing isn't tight. It's loose, it's sloppy, it feels like, yeah, there were maybe 3 or 4 takes done, but everybody was too busy mucking around, or they just forgot to make sure that they were going to CGI all the shit onto their face that they just stopped caring. In fact, if you look at a lot of these sequences without the music or even the audio, the editing fails to tell a comprehensive story beyond what we kind of get is meant to be the main selling point of Cats. They tell you who they are, and that's it. Take this scene, for instance, where Rumpelteazer and Mungo Jerry are terrorizing a house with Victoria. Why are they doing this? Because they're cats. Why are they jumping all over the place? Because they're cats. Why is the editing jumping all over the place? Because they're cats. Is the vase important? Yes, because it sets up the end of the scene where the dog gets alerted. That is the one coherent thing about this entire sequence. Why do they not react at any point when they cause so much wanton destruction and there's all stuff in the air and maybe some of them would have a terrible reaction? Who knows? It doesn't matter. It's Cats. The cutting and close-ups through the pacing of the film is completely off, and it makes you wonder why they needed to do this. The main reason is because of the star power of the film, or just noting who is and isn't more important in the Cats world. The same problems are abound in the first memory sequence. In fact, I'm going to compare this with another scene that Tom Hooper directed, and also a scene that Melanie Oliver edited, the I Dreamed a Dream sequence from Les Mis. The difference between the two is obviously that there are two different performances, and one of them has a whole bunch of shit on their face, and the other one has CGI fur. Anne Hathaway is not known as a singer, but Jennifer Hudson is. Their raw emotion in the sequences are a big part of who their characters are. They are saddened by the sequence of events that have befallen them, and they're letting out that emotion. The difference is that we have an extra character in this sequence. We have Victoria talking to Grisabella, but in comparison, the entire Les Mis sequence with Fantine is entirely just Anne Hathaway's face. It was done in a single take, and obviously there is more expression that we can see, both literally and figuratively, from Anne Hathaway. And we use the exact same technique here with Memories. There's a lot of visual dynamics that are used within the sequence. The lighting is directly on their face. They are showing as much emotion as they can. The problem is that it keeps cutting back to Francesca Hayward, and then it becomes a duet, and then it becomes a mashup of Beautiful Ghost, which was written for the film to try and win an Oscar, and then Universal Studios saw that the movie was hemorrhaging a lot of money, so they pulled the film and the campaign from the process of getting nominated for an Oscar, and then it's...
I think what I was trying to achieve was a combination of extreme realism so that the film would feel rooted in a visceral reality, but also allowing a certain heightening of reality.
Tom Hooper tried to have his cake and eat it too twice. He succeeded in Les Mis, where a lot of people thought that he failed. I think Les Mis is a fine film. It's very easy to follow, the music is amazing, and obviously the very odd choice to sing a lot of the stuff live, it kind of works with the way that the story is told. It's meant to be a heartbreaking and honest and realistic portrayal of Victor Hugo's original story. It's dirty, it's very serious, it's very somber. It takes itself a little bit too serious sometimes, but it works in its final product. Cats, on the other hand, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on so many different levels. Grisabella and Fantine are very similar characters. They're both females who have gone through a lot, and they express themselves through a very, very deep and meaningful and pop culturally relevant song. Musicals have these songs built into them nowadays because they do help win awards. They win Tonys, they win Oscars. They really show an actress's range, whether they are singers or not. The most heartbreaking thing is, obviously, that Jennifer Hudson knows how to sing this song, but you wouldn't be able to tell that from her face or the way that this scene is edited. It's a real problem with a lot of Cats. There is an emotional drive that is meant to go through this film. Yes, there are fun and ridiculous and over-the-top moments, but there is a somber and very, very sad part of it. It often feels like the film wants to be two very, very different things, but it only works on the second level, the more sad, somber level, the more realistic level. There are some parts that are just visually stunning and absolutely incredible that weren't originally a part of the musical, whether it's the train sequence for Skimbleshanks or the Rum Tum Tugger sequence. They look amazing. They really, really make the film what it is. Over the top, ridiculous, fun. But after dunking on the film for about an hour, we have the memory sequence, and it doesn't fit. It makes you feel real bad. If it was Tom Hooper's intention to make everybody feel terrible after making fun of his movie for an hour, congratulations, Tom. You succeeded. But I got something that you should know. You really needed to do the facial mocap better in your film because that would have accentuated a lot of your performances. Because, buddy, that's the second worst part of this fucking movie.
We've used digital fur technology to create the most perfect covering of fur.
The facial animations and visual effects mistakes are throughout all of Cats. Now here's why the facial animation looks weird. Mocap is meant to work directly with the actors and the scenes that they're portraying. They have dots put on their faces and they help the animators have a level of stability when crafting the digital animation for them. There's only a few behind the scenes shots that were released by the actors through their Instagram, which I unfortunately had to crawl through, where this stuff happened. Obviously, I have no background in visual effects, so I'm only speaking on what very basic knowledge I could find. I can actually refer to the fact that Why Is Cats did speak directly to the visual effects team, so if you want to go into more depth, you can talk to them. For my sources, I spoke to a furry. Take it away, Ripley.
If they had done any, and I mean any research on the fandom, talked to one fursuiter, one artist, one Constaff representative, one maker, anybody, it might have actually been a movie as opposed to just a gigantic trash fire. And I mean, gosh, now the public perception of furries is like, that's what people think we are? You've got to be kidding me. Oh God, I just realized I'm gonna be a part of this now.
Thank you so much for that, Ripley. And basically, I would like to make a point about the fact that from a community that has basically made the official stance on anthropomorphized characters, the furry community should have been consulted when it came to visual effects. But I guess they weren't, and that's why they got themselves into the mess that they're in right now. However, it looks like the majority of the film was shot without this facial animation in mind. It was almost like it was an afterthought and that they were digitally reproduced and to put on the actors' faces as if they were wearing a weird furry mask.
Guys had black dots all over your faces, and you were putting out these incredible performances looking like that at someone else who was looking like that. How tough was it, like, not to crack up and, like, you know, to stay in character?
We found our inner cats and became that in a moment, because I don't really recall seeing dots on any of their faces.
To make the animation even worse, the fact that they added no real depth to their faces is a real shame. There was some makeup put on their face while they were filming, and you can kind of see that in some of the behind-the-scenes sequences. It at least adds a little bit of depth to their characters, or some extra expression that is honestly a wasted opportunity. That's one of the greatest things about Cats as a musical, and one thing I really enjoyed is that the makeup in the original stage musical really shows off these characters and who they are. How old they are, how they react to certain situations, and just simply how they are as cats. One of the best parts of watching footage of the original musical is the way that the makeup accentuates their faces and how different they are. I can't tell the difference between some of these background characters or if I should actually care about them. This is a huge difference from the original stage musical, and I imagine a lot of the fans were upset when they saw what it actually looked like. The fact that there are so many different sequences that honestly could have benefited from just minor changes would have been so nice. And the fact that they just didn't really bother after being told it was terrible is kind of heartbreaking. The CGI is fine. It's okay to look at in single frames, but when it's moving, sometimes it just feels like it's a little bit out of sync. I'm not going to say that it's the worst part of the film, because it's not. It's far from it. There are so many other questions that need to be raised about this film and the production that I honestly don't have time to get into it. But there are so many little issues here in the CGI work that could have just been fixed or adjusted that they clearly didn't do for two main reasons. They were trying to make the December release date, and they didn't want to listen to those who said that it looked horrible. They rushed the final product, and then they tried to release an updated version weeks after the film's release, but the damage had already been done. The damage had technically been done by the time the second trailer was released in July of 2019, but they still didn't listen. They weren't going to bow to the people of Twitter in the same way that the Sonic people did. And whether or not they already had a backup ready to go and maybe this was a false flag operation that was done by the people of Paramount Pictures, we'll never know. But the point is that Tom Hooper believed in his vision. He believed that this is what the Cats were meant to look like, despite the fact that there's been no other film that's ever looked like this before, and probably never will in the future unless it's used as an example of bad CGI. But the most tragic part is that they treated the visual effects team extremely poorly, and they released an unfinished product. As a true hardcore gamer that truly knows that gamers really need to rise up, the tragedy of all of this is that, as a gamer, we understand what is happening here. This has been happening in the games industry for almost a decade. They violated two of the main fears that every gamer has about a product or a game that they really love. Never rush a game to a release date, as it will always be awful, and delay when you can. And number two, never release an unfinished product. It will always be bad, and people will always regret their purchase. Both of these happen all the time in the games industry. Since early access and crunch time became two very common traits in big AAA titles, we've suffered. We've all suffered as gamers. The developers suffer, and then ultimately the games industry overall suffers. And it would be a real shame for the film industry to do the same. It was honestly depressing to read that this had already happened to a film that simply was already struggling. It was like kicking a dog when it's down. It shouldn't be this way, but this is what happens when directors are out of their depth and are simply not given enough time for the post-production process.
I think the toughest thing for a director to do is to know what he wants. It's not how to get what you want, it's knowing what you want. So many people make movies, they don't know what they want. They say, well, I think I want this. I'm so in love with the Disney animators, why I think animation is the father of cinema, live action cinema. Because they have to have in their mind a clear picture of how a chipmunk rolls over in the snow. They gotta know what each side of that chipmunk looks like. And they don't build chipmunks and roll them over in fake snow. They have to use their imaginations and paint these things 12 cells a second. And how the fur moves and how the wind's blowing. And it's just, that's why I think all directors should be animators first. Because you really can take the imagination and become something tangible. It's just something you can hold in your hand. You can say, can you see this? No? Well, I can. And then you make that.
But also, don't add buttholes into your fucking film and then take them out when you get scared afterwards. Don't treat your visual effects team like shit. Don't try and blame the film on a team that you told to do this. They weren't in charge of the final post-production process. You were. You had visual effects supervisors and you had a whole team of people to tell you the right thing to do, and they didn't. Why, we may never know. I think that there's one particular scene that truly shows the horror that is the visual effects of Cats. Jenny Anydots in the original musical is a cat that's featured maybe for 10 minutes out of the 2-hour running time. And there's a reason why Rebel Wilson is in more than about half of this film. There's also a reason why Rebel Wilson won a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actress. From just the start of the movie, it's the absolute worst sequence of the film. It happens within the first 20 minutes, and they set such a high bar with the opening titles that it's a real shame. It's a damn shame. They set that bar and clear it quicker than kids in a Willy Wonka factory. Sweet fucking Christ. If you thought the opening was bad, you have no idea how worse this film can get. The entire Jenny Anydots sequence from the first time we see Rebel Wilson as a Gumby cat is fascinating because you have no idea that this sequence is so short and so tiny in the original production. Jenny doesn't get any other stage time in the original musical. In fact, she doesn't even have that much to sing in the original sequence. It's handled by this trio of just very sexy cats who are over here. She doesn't even have that much to do in the wider cast when you put her stage time together. It's no more than 10 to 15 minutes, and she becomes a part of the chorus just shortly after her sequence is done. However, in the movie, Rebel Wilson's part is scattered through the performance like bodies on Normandy Beach.
Face should be on a poster.
You forget she's there until she just obviously makes her presence known. That's what Rebel Wilson is known for.
Everyone has their part, but Rebel, you sang out loud and proud. Did you love that?
I mean, I just love singing in general because it's so joyful.
Yeah.
But I think when people watch the film, you got to realize, like, this is not like other movie musicals.
That's why you cast her and stuff. She is a strong female comedic lead. To make matters worse, and it's really the saddest part, is that Rebel Wilson puts in such a mediocre performance, and it's a real shame, because I was originally going to just dunk on her because she can't sing, but she can sing.
When the day's hustle and bustle is done.
She can super sing. And I'm not just saying like, oh, she was in the Pitch Perfect movies, of course she can sing. I mean, she's been in several other musicals and has done several other live musical performances, and she does extremely well. I did a whole bunch of research. She has been a part of 2 different Disney musicals, one where she played LaFau in Beauty and the Beast, and another where she played Ursula in The Little Mermaid.
Poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need.
And she fucking kills it. I know that these are like bootleg recordings, and I'm sorry to the people who I took this footage from. You are credited below, but Jesus Christ, she does such an amazing job, and she gives it her fucking all. Why doesn't she do that in this movie? The problem is that I just wish it was better. Every time I watch this film, I think it's going to get better, and it doesn't. And there are other podcasts and a lot of other amazing people who have broken this film down. Obviously, the guys from The Worst Idea of All Time also had a go at it, and I see the absurdity of their task from afar. But to look at it up close, to see Rebel Wilson time and time again, just not doing her best. And look, I'm trying not to say so much because she's extremely litigious, and I hope she never sees this video, but I'm just going to play these few moments over footage of her singing and doing funny things during the movie. Because honestly, I wrote out a whole section about Rebel Wilson's performance and why it's so bad, and I think the footage speaks for itself. She does what she's made to do. She probably has the exact same, like, direction that Paul Feig gave to the Ghostbusters in the Ghostbusters movie. Just be there, say some funny stuff, and then we'll just cut to you when we need to. And that's not how a movie works. That's not how character development works. That's not how anything should work. In comparison to the musical, the whole Gumby cat sequence, Jenny Anydots is only in there for a few bits. Like, it's not that much. She's not improvising on the side, she's not throwing in a few funny little lines. She's not even a notable part of the chorus because she's a house cat. She stays in the house. She doesn't really do too much outside. The majority of her musical portion is given to this trio of tabby cats because it brings her story to life, and we are told from the Jellicle cats what she's like. It's showing, not telling. To make matters even worse than the musical, the cockroaches and mice are just other Jellicle cats in costume. It's actually this cute little weird ensemble, and it has a level of creativity that is not terrifying and horrible and weird and gross and just so fucked up. It's just, look at this. Like, I know people spent like months dunking on it on Twitter, but Jesus fucking, it's beyond the uncanny valley. It's beyond, because I am sick of people using that as an excuse for like, oh, it looks weird because of this thing and blah blah blah. And it's just wrong. If we want to look at this from a realistic perspective, yes, cats do shit like this. They do weird, terrifying, and gross things. They have hairballs, they catch mice, they catch cockroaches. Sometimes you'll wake up and a fucking half-dead mouse is in your bed. I've lived with a cat. I have done several bits of berating of a cat for doing gross, weird shit. But I don't need to see a fucking movie about it. I could watch a documentary like Ketty about it, but what happens in this sequence is something else. It's beyond explanation. It's beyond gross. It's just visually unappealing. There's a few cute camera tricks, and the use of CGI to replace these incredibly talented dancers is fine, and I just wish it was better. I wish it was so much better. I wish it was better because I aspire to one day make something that people enjoy and care about. And as someone who doesn't truly believe in auteur theory, I've stated this on other video essays, I think that there's only one person we can truly blame for all of this. And that man is Tom Hooper.
I fell in love with the film industry through, oddly enough, through the musical.
Boy, Hollywood's dumb, isn't it? It's really dumb.
Whoa, for the longest time. Whoa, for the longest.
Now, obviously, when discussing huge directors, Academy Award-winning directors, we have to take into account that going through the process of talking about terrible films is not too different from the Kubler-Ross model of dealing with grief, in that we will go through 5 different stages, and that this is definitely not a hack way to structure the ending of this review. First and foremost, Tom Hooper is not a director. Or to clarify, Tom Hooper is not a musical director. Yes, he had won a series of awards for directing Les Mis, but it never really had to do with his directing. His directorial style is very personal. It's very up close and in your face. He uses a lot of negative space to tell the story about the distance that his characters feel. I wish a little bit of Danish Girl to kind of get a little bit more of his oeuvre, as it were, but to put it lightly, Tom Hooper was the wrong choice to direct Cats. I understand he's a huge fan, and he obviously has a lot of experience in directing these bombastic, these over-the-top type films, but there is a level of fun and joy that really does not come across in this movie. That the way that Tom Hooper directs is very straightforward. It's very, very by the numbers. I'm not saying that he's a boring director, I'm just saying that there is a level of creative flair that is missing from Cats, or it's devoid. The best way to compare it is obviously the scenes of Memories and I Dreamed a Dream from Les Mis, and I obviously brought this up previously in the review, but the way that they are both tonally similar but completely shot differently points to the fact that Tom Hooper understands drama. He understands the emphasis of having a somber tone. He understands making sure female actresses who are very upset are filmed properly and close up, almost like an emotional black hole that you just get sucked right into. Secondly, Tom Hooper was incredibly cruel to the visual effects team. Now, obviously, this is hearsay more than anything else, but I think that when you hear stories like this, they tend to be very true. I'm not saying this is a believe all visual effects teams situation, but the way that the visual effects artists have been treated over the last 5 years, especially by directors and by larger corporations, it is a very clear sign that this is a wider problem in Hollywood, that these teams are farmed or essentially purchased via contract rather than using the in-house visual effects teams such as at Marvel or Disney. It is a sad situation because a lot of these teams are used to contract work. They usually have 3 or 4 gigs going at once, and then essentially they can never really turn down work because it is expensive to run a visual effects house. They often go to the lowest bidder, and then eventually when the output is not ideal, you get critics saying stuff like this. You get people like me criticizing the visual effects to the point where it almost feels like that is the whole reason the film is broken.
It's like you don't understand. They're turning us into cats.
But it's not. Tom Hooper is a director. He's somebody who has authorial intent. He is somebody who is in control of a lot of these post-production processes. And to know, at least in hearsay, that the way that he treated the visual effects team was in a negative and almost cruel light, from these quotes alone, it's heartbreaking. It's horrible. It's not how you ever want to see a director, even as somebody who is prestigious, if you can call it that, like Tom Hooper. I do wish that these teams didn't have to shut down, or at least didn't have to deal with shitty directors. I would much prefer them to work with someone like the Russo brothers, or James Gunn, or even Robert Rodriguez, but I mean, he does all of his post-production stuff in-house. He's basically a one-man band for this kind of stuff. This leads to my third point. Tom Hooper didn't know what he wanted. He had an idea of what he wanted, I think 30 years ago when he saw Cats originally. He never actually talked about seeing Cats, or at least the revival of Cats. I imagine he was invited at some point when the film was being optioned by Universal again, by Andrew Lloyd Webber. We would have been in a situation where things had changed, and I think that there are definite signs that things had changed and that Tom Hooper put some things that had changed from his childhood back into this film. This includes sequences such as Growl Tiger, or even just adding the extra Jenny Annie Dots and Buster for Jones scenes. He clearly liked these actors, and he was not going to say no to them because they're so funny and charismatic, and he thought that this is the tone that ultimately was going to be a part of the biggest selling points of Cats, that it was going to be a fun little romp. I mean, that's why people see Cats, right? Because it's a fun little romp. But I guess things didn't work out that way, and obviously he tirelessly worked and worked and worked until the day of the premiere, because that's what everybody else was saying. And then ultimately, you get this weirdly half saccharine, half maudlin, half improvised comedy that doesn't work on any level, and it makes you feel as though Tom Hooper was out of his depth. Not just from an emotional or tonal standpoint, but from a visual effects standpoint. Looking at his previous work, Les Mis was probably the biggest visual effects work that he had ever done. And with a film that literally has a visual effect in more than 90% of its shots, mainly just due to the cast having digital fur applied to their bodies, he didn't know what he wanted. And obviously this is me projecting a lot of stuff onto Tom. I don't know his final intent, I don't know anything about how Tom Hooper felt about Cats except for what he said in these interviews. But ultimately, it's what we see on screen. It's a jumbled mess of a movie that doesn't really know where it wants to be or what it wants to do, much like a cat. You have this team who were working day and night, 18-hour shifts, to try and make the best thing Tom Hooper wanted, and this is what it came up with.
There's no doing anything.
A film that barely passes as a musical, let alone as a adaptation of a very beloved musical. As I mentioned previously, I think the people who were left in the dust most were the fans of the film. As someone who was coming into this blind and high, I can joke and jab and gesture around how bad this film is, but I can't shake the fact that there were people who were extremely let down by Tom Hooper, that they didn't get what they wanted from it. I remember when I saw the film and there was this wonderful old couple, clearly on a date, clearly just happy to be out together. This was before the quarantine, obviously. They're probably dead now. They were sitting 3 rows in front of me and somebody who I was seeing the film with, and they were happy. They laughed. The old lady clapped during the Jellicle cat sequences. They were really enjoying it. I guess they weren't let down by the film. But I know I was. I know that by the time that the edible that I had taken had worn off, it was about an hour into the film, and I realized the true horror that was before me. That Tom Hooper's directorial style simply doesn't work for Cats. And here's why. The fourth point I want to make is that he filmed this film like he filmed Les Mis. All of the audio and singing and dancing was done live on set. There were a lot of people who worked with him on Les Mis on this film. A lot of set designers, a lot of editors, a lot of people who Tom trusts. It was a labor of love for these people. They were working together for the first time in possibly over 7 years, and they were trying to make something and create the same feeling that they had with Les Mis. The problem is that Les Mis is a beautiful historical epic. It, like Cats, is over 30 years of fandom. It is beloved from a literature standpoint, it is beloved from a musical standpoint, it is over the top, it is bombastic, it is every emotion you could possibly have thrown into a musical, and then some. And I think that while a lot of people decried Tom Hooper's choices for Les Mis, I think it kind of worked. And look, maybe saying that Tom Hooper didn't know what he wanted is a bit reductionist, but let me just point out 3 things that I can't get my fucking mind off that he definitely decided on. Number 1, cat school.
Cat school. Cat school.
To cat school. So cat school?
Is there a cat school? Just say we all went to cat school and everyone's like,
So basically, she gives you all the... Now everything I say sounds ridiculous in my mind.
I'm out. That's why they didn't call me. Oh, shoot!
There is a story about Dustin Hoffman working on the set of Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier obviously is one of the most prestigious actors of all time. There are awards named after this man for acting. And Hoffman and Olivier are talking on set one day, and Hoffman tells Olivier that he hasn't slept in over 72 hours to just feel this emotional verisimilitude about the film, about the character. Then Olivier just leans over to Hoffman and says, "My dear boy, why don't you just try acting?" And that's how I feel about Cat School.
You get in there and you get on your knees and you prowl around.
Really?
You nuzzle up on people all day. I'm not lying.
Cat School is brought up on so many different occasions and is apparently the brainchild of this woman, Sarah Dowling.
Curious, what are your qualifications
Yeah,
as
so
a cat?
I trained for 25 years in CAT University. So I'm a choreographer and a movement coach, so a movement specialist. So I was given a research time on this movie, but I do other things.
We were in 2 hours of cat school a day for 3.5 months.
I had to go through literally hours of footage to try and find this woman, and ultimately it led me to this weird British website where you can apparently hire her, like she's represented by these agents here. And look, I don't think Cat School is a bad idea. However, looking through a bunch of the research of the original musical Cats, there isn't a cat school. These people were just training to be in the musical Cats.
I staged this show, choreographed it in absolutely record time. I mean, I think we had something like 5.5 weeks, so we were so up against it for time, and it was a very hard show to get the kids through the first time, that I don't think we thought about whether we would be hit or not. We were just praying we could even open.
It's almost like it's unnecessary, that this was an extremely unnecessary part, that you didn't need to go to cat school to act like a cat. In fact, I remember when I was in drama school, and one of the first things that they try to teach you is just to imitate animals, to at least interact with one another like your different types of animals. It's a bit cringy and a little bit weird, and it's something I try not to think about often, especially late at night when I'm trying to get to sleep. These people should know how to act, except maybe Francesca Hayward. But ultimately, these people should know how to be cats. A lot of these people are professionally trained. A lot of these people have over 30 years of acting experience under their belt. So why the Cat School?
My greatest regret is I should have created like a Cat School university timed with release, and everyone could have come enrolled on at Cat School across the nation.
I hate it. I hate it so much. It just feels like I'm worried that Sarah Dowling got paid $1 million to run a cat school. I think that's what I'm worried about. But mainly, I think this was a choice by Tom Hooper. He's actually even in this clip with James Corden on The Late Late Show where they make fun of cat school.
Guys?
Yeah, give him total privacy.
In hindsight, I should have asked him what kind of bathroom break he needed. That backfired.
And clearly it's just a joke to them. I mean, that's fine. I mean, Cats is a joke to a lot of people, but these are the people who are in the movie Cats. Jesus Christ. Secondly, updating the choreography. Now, I don't know if this was Tom Hooper's choice, but it definitely feels like he needed to update the choreography mainly for a 2019 audience. There was actually originally Wayne McGregor was going to be the original choreographer, but he dropped out of the film a few months into production. And then he was replaced by Andy Blankenbuehler, who obviously is a Tony Award-winning choreographer for Hamilton. Now, this is obviously where a lot of the new dancing comes into play. A lot of the stuff is definitely not in the 1998 version, and it doesn't really add anything to the musical. It doesn't add anything to the characters. In fact, I couldn't tell you who the characters the Les twins play. It's just a weird part of the film. Like they cut to it a lot, and it just feels out of place. And they're all very talented, but it also doesn't add. This isn't a Jellicle dance thing. It's not something that Cats do. So why did you update the choreo? I mean, you should have updated the music, to be honest, which obviously you did. The song Beautiful Ghosts is quite lovely, and I think it does resonate with the entire musical and the entire concept of Cats. It's a very lovely song. Taylor Swift wrote a very good song. We know that she's a Grammy Award-winning artist. I don't mind Taylor Swift. I think that she's quite good, and I think 1989 is a fucking banger of an album. But you didn't need to get Francesca Hayward to sing it.
Follow me home. If you dare to.
She's not a singer. and it feels out of place to do a weird mashup with Grisabella's memories. It feels so out of place, and it really just feels like that was like a Tom Hooper idea. And obviously I know that they were trying to get an Oscar, like an original song Oscar for it, because that's what they tried to do, and then they suspended their Oscar campaign because it wasn't working. It just sucks, dude. It's just a real bad choice. And then finally, the butthole cut. Look, I don't think the butthole cut actually exists, and whether or not it exists is beside the point. It's 2020. WWE's Vince McMahon is in charge of economic management during the reopening of America. The Mafia is doing a more efficient job distributing food in local governments in Italy. Insurance companies are not giving people money despite taking out pandemic insurance. Anything is fucking possible. So why doesn't a butthole cut of Cats exist? I think the point is that this story alone shouldn't exist. The possibility of it shouldn't exist. The possibility of a Cats version where someone, as a creative choice, thought it was a good idea shouldn't exist. Now, the footage you're actually watching now is from the great team at VXP Comedy. I've obviously credited them here and below, and they applied it. They put it back in there, and it doesn't feel like it's out of place for this film. That feels like the butthole of movies. As of recording this audio, Snopes, a wonderful fact-checking website, has still declared that the fact that this cut of the film may exist is unproven at the very least. However, there are some people in the crew that have stated that it does, and obviously we only have hearsay for a lot of this stuff, but a man can dream. A man can truly dream. Anyway, now on to my next point about why Tom Hooper is a terrible director and a terrible choice for Cats.
We would always have to be walking this line between less dance, more cat, more human, less human, more cat.
I think the way that Tom Hooper pulled off Les Mis is a triumph. He was trying something new, he didn't know it was going to work, and I always applaud a director for trying something that they'd never done before. The problem is that he tried to do it again, and it didn't work. It simply just does not work. Yes, obviously during musicals, actors and performers are going to be singing live on set, or at least on stage. But Cats doesn't necessarily need that.
The idea is to go from a high note to a low note. Whoa.
There's a lot of handheld camera work. There's a lot of close-ups. There's a lot of weird wide shots and a lot of very quick cutting that it just feels jumbled. It feels like I never know truly what to feel in some of these scenes or how serious to take it. Despite the fact that there were several interviews about not taking Cats seriously, you still need to have a level of normality before coming into the world. I mean, the opening shot of the film literally has a bunch of cat eyes and a bunch of clouds, so I wish Cats was over the top and ridiculous and not terrifying. I wish it was not a difficult film to watch, and I've watched it 10 times now, both sober and otherwise. It's a hard film to process, and I think a lot of that lays with the way that Tom Hooper directs his films. He clearly lets his actors do what they need to do. He trusts them, which I think is important as a director, but also as a director, you should direct them. To let them do a whole bunch of improvising that really just, he cuts away to this like 3 different times, and it never adds to the story or the characters or the film in general. It's just like, well, we have this funny line, so let's put this in here.
And so, I mean, for me, I think myself and James Corden, we were kind of there to bring some of the comedy into Cats.
Yeah, he did.
And I know that that's also an editorial thing as well, but also it's hard not to blame Tom Hooper for something like this. And as we get to the end of this model, and I stop denying, and I stop getting angry about these situations, ultimately, I have to bargain. And if I had to trade something, say the film wasn't going to be $100 million, or $95 million, or even $80 million, say it was $50 million, and I got to trade Tom Hooper and his directorial fee for someone who I think could really blow Cats out of the fucking water, I would trade it for Baz Luhrmann any day of the week. I don't think Baz Luhrmann's made a good film in over 2 decades, but I think Baz Luhrmann would have made Cats the absolute greatest movie musical adaptation of all time. Having watched the original musical twice, and obviously, again, having to pull footage from it for this video, Baz Luhrmann seems like the perfect fit for the film Cats. And the weird thing is that during my research for this review, there were 2 specific reviewers who actually called this out, and I was amazed that I wasn't the only person who thought about this. That there was a possibility that this film could be good, but with a different director. And I wholeheartedly agree that these critics are right. that Tom Hooper was the wrong fit for this film. And there are other bigger problems with the film, but I think that the main point, regardless of auteur theory, regardless of how I feel about his other works, that I would have traded Tom Hooper for Baz Luhrmann. Baz Luhrmann has the bombast, the style, the directing, the cutting, the way that he brings a musical to life is something that I miss about musicals. I was listening to The Greatest Showman soundtrack and watching clips of it recently because I wanted to sort of look at other modern musicals. The only most recent example that I can remember was La La Land that I really watched and enjoyed, and I know that that's not necessarily a traditional musical for a whole range of reasons. But The Greatest Showman was ridiculous. It was over the top. It was amazing. There were people who I never thought would actually be presented as singers. And I don't mean from an inclusivity standpoint. It was exciting to see. And yes, I know it's based on a man who was basically a liar his entire life, but it reminded me that musicals could be this way. That there was a suspension of disbelief that you could believe in. That's why people go see musicals. It's why people go see Cats. And I know at the moment Baz Luhrmann is obviously directing a film about Elvis, and I don't know how that film's gonna go down, but I wish he directed Cats. I know it's a weird thing to end this review on the fact that a better director could have done a better job, but that's the conclusion I had to come to. That Baz Luhrmann, a man who I don't really respect as a director, and I think that his best years are behind him, could have made Cats fucking amazing. But that's me being wishy-washy. I think that ultimately I just wish Cats was a better film. I'm a big fan of musicals. In fact, anybody who watched my 2010s mashup knows that I put 3 musicals on that list. I feel like, other than, people who've made some great Cats content and who are huge fans of Cats, that I'm speaking out of my depth on so many different levels. I don't have a background in musical history. I don't have a background in even just movie musicals. Cats was a mess because we wanted it to be a mess. We saw from those first trailers that we were projecting an idea of what Cats was going to be, even if we weren't fans, and that it became something way worse than we ever thought possible. It ruined the world. Without Cats, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. Maybe we would have focused on quarantining better, or... No, I can't. I can't. At the end of the day, Cats 2019 is much like Tom Hooper. It exists. It's a blank slate. You could give any production to Tom Hooper, and I'm pretty sure he would make an adequate film. It's a blank slate of a movie. It's whatever you want it to be about, essentially. It can be about inclusivity. It can be about hope. It can be about watching things that were once great fade into oblivion. Because that's what happened. Now, you may need an hour-long lore video to explain who each of these characters are and why they want to go to the Heaviside Layer. I know, because I had to watch a lot of those videos and read a lot about that on the Cats Wikia to see if I've missed anything, but the saddest part of all about this film, with all the actors, the production designers, the crew, the director, the producers, the editors, the everything, they did nothing wrong here. They are not on trial. We are not their jury, and there is no court in the world that could convict them, in our eyes, of being bad people. They're not bad cats. They don't need to be shamed. They don't need to have their faces pushed into their piss that they've made here. They made an adequate and competent film, which is a really sad bar that we've set for Hollywood. They technically, at the end of the day, made an adaptation of Cats. It features cats. It has music from the musical Cats. It is a story about cats. There is technically nothing wrong about Cats, other than the fact that it is broken as a movie, and when they gave themselves time to fix it, with direct feedback from not only their main audience, but from the musical community, and furries, and the movie-going public, and Twitter, they never fixed it. They never fixed any of the issues that they said they would. They lied about it constantly, and they clearly either never told the cast of Cats, or they simply lied to them. They lied to everyone who mattered. And who could have saved us from this mess? Was it them? We're not sure.
Hey, hang on a second, they're people. But they're cats. Okay, this is actually blowing my mind.
And sure, almost all marketing is lying one way or another, but this is something we shouldn't expect. To be let down this hard for this long for this amount of money, it's a bummer. It's not depressing, it's not something to be upset about. But the problem is that I don't think Hollywood is going to learn their lesson from this. That they will be shamed time and time again for their failures, but at the end of the day, what they want is what we gave them. Money and attention. Which, look, yes, they obviously were a box office bomb, but not in the grand scale of box office bombs. There were a lot of films that came out in 2019 that did far, far worse than Cats, that had worse casts, that had worse people working on their films. They had people who barely saw their movies, barely had a blip on their radar, that were boring, that were mediocre, that were intentionally bad, that were just nothing.
You have kids that love you and a wife that adores you.
At least Cats is something. Cats is different. Cats is something else. There were so many questions that I was asking during this review, and I never really got an answer for. Like, why are, like, things relatively to the size of cats, except for, like, flowers or, like, these regular things? Like, why are some of them wearing shoes? Why do they dance? Point is that we'll never have any of these answers. But in the end, you have to be honest about Cats. That it doesn't work on any level. The editing is too quick and really creates a fractured movie that doesn't give us any new information with the way that they tell their story. The new choreography is interesting to look at but adds nothing to the story and characters. The visual effects are mediocre at best and do nothing to accentuate the performances. The cinematography is too realistic to be enjoyable and the sets are being built too exaggerated to be believable. Nothing fundamentally works about Cats. Because Tom Hooper and his team were trying to apply a directorial style which works for ultra-realistic, dirty, and bombastic films, or in this case, musicals. And Cats is only one of those things. Yes, Cats are dirty, and, well, if you wanted to consider how sexual the original musical was, okay, yeah, it's dirty. It's bombastic. But you don't get that feeling from the musical Cats. There are so many scenes where they cut to the wider shots of the cast, whether they're dancing or singing or talking about the Jellicle Ball, and you notice how small this cast actually is. When you watch the original musical, it feels like everything is happening all at once, and it is amazing. It is dynamic. It is choreographed in a way to make you sit up and pay attention. But you see these wide shots and you notice how bare these worlds are, how empty, how dark, how lonely the world of Cats is in a cinematic context. It's not exciting, it isn't fascinating, it isn't being brought into this magical, beautiful world. It's like a magician pulling a dead rabbit out of a hat. You notice how hollow the hat is. You notice that feeling of dread is constantly over you. And at the end of the day, we do feel that way about Cats because we feel like something has died. Because Cats isn't about digitized buttholes or bad CGI faces or the fact that 80s musicals are weird or even about a director trying and failing to have another go about a musical he's deeply passionate about. It's just about cats, man. How do you fuck up a musical about cats? Something that worked for 3 decades and you tried once and you couldn't do it. Cats is what this film should have been about. And it's not. It ultimately fails at what it's trying to do. The intent and implication of Cats, or just trying to make a film about cats, is about the existential crisis faced by a group of aging and uncertain cats in the light of a bright new day. Maybe not relatable for some, but it's resonated with audiences for over 30 years. And by simply not catering towards them, they failed creatively, musically, and ultimately financially. And we technically already had a film in 2019 basically about that, except Cats were replaced with Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. Cats is a failure on almost every level. It has a director who's out of his depth, a visual effects team out of time, and performers out of breath. It doesn't know what it wants to be, and yet it is trying its hardest at every step.
Do you think if they didn't CGI your junk out, it would get much better reviews? Reviews don't matter, man. Reviews don't matter. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, the people are going to go see it, and it's going to be a deportation to another dimension. And it's an incredible, brave piece of art.
And with that, I think that the most relatable part of Cats is just that it wants to be something. It's something we all strive for, whether we're creative or, in my case, not creative at all. With the months of writing and putting this whole video essay together, I think I at least found some closure. I think there is a zen in failure. And like all failure, it ultimately ends, and we learn from it. And that's what I learned from Cats, is that it ends. After the 10th viewing, I knew its peaks and valleys. I knew how it was going to end. We may give our best performances, and are always trying for a second chance, but not everybody will notice. But we have to remember, not everybody gets a second chance. But all it takes is heart, and the compassion of one person, to truly change your life. And with that, I no longer wish any ill will towards Cats, or its creators, or its director. And with that at the end, I realized that this is the true Jellicle choice. To truly know that I don't have to talk about cats anymore, or think about it, or write about it. The truest joy, Jellicle or not, is to just exist around cats. Because that's all they want. They want to do their own thing. That's what cats do. That and Rebel Wilson absolutely just fucking sucks, man. This is... That's it. I hopefully don't get sued for making this video. If you would like to support me, obviously you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/helpharrison. This is obviously the biggest thing I've ever done and put together, even more so than a video that I created last year that eventually sent me to the hospital and gave me shingles. I want to thank everybody who helped put this video essay together. So many people sending me so many clips and articles and just so much support. I know that not everybody is going to watch a 40-minute plus video about cats, but look, I feel like I put in the legwork for this. I'm sorry that it's late, because all of my videos are technically late now, but I thank everybody who is supporting me on Patreon, who reached out to me, who talked to me about cats, who gave me their opinion. Obviously, Ripley, thank you so much for sending me that clip. But yes, thank you so much for watching this video. Please do support me if you can. Share this out if you like it. Please do look at the amazing videos by Lindsay Ellis and Ralph Sepe, as well as check out the podcast Why Is Cats by Cameron James. I'm just so glad that now this is all done, that I've written and recorded all this, I get to enjoy their work, because they did a better job than I did, I can tell you that right now. Thank you all so much for watching. Do like and subscribe. Do leave a comment if you got all the way through. If you did, just put the word bananas in the title. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Harrison Engstrom, and this was my video essay about cats.